Hi, I'm Dave Clark, one of the Senior Product Managers at SquaredUp. This is going to be a live workshop on mastering the WebAPI data source, which lets you pull data from any API and bring it into SquaredUp to start visualizing it. Let's dive in. SquaredUp has around 80 data sources available today, and this is great. They're all out of the box, ready to go, but we all work with a wide range of different tools, and sometimes the integration you want just isn't there. Perhaps it's a custom tool or a niche product that we don't have an integration for. We do offer a few data sources in SquaredUp to let you pull in that custom data. So WebAPI is one of them. Obviously, we're going to talk about that today, but we do also have CSV and PowerShell. And I also wanted to mention the SharePoint files data source, which is launching today from the SquaredUp Labs team. So great to see that one out there as well. But let's focus on the Web API. Today we're going to cover a few topics. We're going to look at setting up that data source, things like authentication. We'll look at building a tile and how to configure those requests. We'll look at configuring those columns with metadata and shaping, and then we'll also take a look at some advanced parameters. And if you hang around to the end, there's a sneak peek of something we've been working on as well. But first, a little bit of background. This is where I live. It's a quaint little village in England, and this is the main road. And there's a lovely river that runs alongside it, which is great. It's a really beautiful place. But sometimes it looks a little bit more like this, which is kind of inconvenient. And I thought this session would be a really fun chance to explore. Can I monitor this river? Can I take a look at the flood levels and monitor that with SquaredUp? So I did some digging and I found there is an API. The Environment Agency in the UK publish a real-time flood monitoring API, which has all sorts of good data. So I'm going to dive in. We'll build a few tiles and I'll show off a few features along the way. So let's jump over to SquaredUp. And here we're in SquaredUp. We don't have any dashboards or data sources, so we're completely starting from zero here. So the first thing we will do is add that data source. And as I mentioned, there's a whole catalog, but we'll have a look for WebAPI. And I'll use the basic WebAPI data source. You can run it on-prem if you like, if you've got local connections you want to make. But for this, we'll just use the cloud-based plugin. So I can select that plugin and I can give it a name. So I'll call this the EA API. And then you can start configuring it. So the first thing we need is the base URL. That's just the top level URL for your API. So I'll drop that in. So we've got, the environment.data.gov.uk. Obviously, when you make requests, there might be different endpoints. So this just gives you the base that every request will start with. You can then configure authentication. So by default, we won't provide any authentication. We'll just assume it's a public API. You can provide basic auth credentials with username and password, or you can do a full OAuth 2 flow. So if you're working with an API that has that OAuth flow, you'll need to enter things like your client ID and secret and a few other bits and pieces there. For this, we'll stick with no authentication. We don't need to add any headers, and we're not worried about certificate errors. You do get a chance to test the API here. So I can take one of the API endpoints here, which is just a list of any ongoing floods currently. And you can configure that basic request if that needs headers, if that needs any query arguments, and so on. But I can hit send and just make sure that API is working. This is obviously really useful if you are testing out any of those authentication options. But for us, I can see, yeah, we're getting some data back. So that's all good. So we'll add that API to the workspace. That will do some brief configuration, and then we're good to go. We can start dashboarding. So I'll add a new dashboard, and what I want to do here is build just a few different tiles. We'll look at some flood alerts. We'll look at some current water levels for the river near me and the water level over time on a line chart. So we'll make use of a few different visualizations. So I can show you how easy it is to take data from an API and start visualizing it. So let's set our first tile. Here I can select Web API, and I'll use the HTTP request data stream. You can see it's given me that base URL, and then I can enter that path to the list of floods. You're able to enter things like query parameters, add headers, and if you were, for example, doing a post request, you'll be able to include a body there as well. Let's do a get request to that endpoint. If you come along to response, you do get a chance to preview that response. And one of the things you might want to do here is pick out a particular property. So this API returns a few bits of just metadata that we don't need. The actual data about floods is under this items property. So I can type items here, and that'll just focus on that set of data. If I hit apply and done, we can see that data coming back, and it looks like there's some flood alert for a river up in Lancashire. Now, sometimes you'll see things like object. So by default, SquaredUp assumes every bit of data is just a string or a number. If you have things like nested objects, you can expand those. So if you come into response here and hit expand inner objects, hit apply again, you'll see now actually we pull out some of those properties from that nested object, so you can start to get more of that data back. So what I want to do here is actually create a block for every flood alert. Now by default, it's just picked the ID as the label. But I probably want something like description, so I can see the name of the river, and perhaps the severity as the sub-label there. So yeah, warning no longer in force. So actually that flood warning is ending, which is always good to hear. One thing we're missing here is state. At the moment, this is just grey, and this is where our columns tab comes in. So the columns tab shows you all the available columns that are coming back from the WebAPI or any data stream for that matter. But I can do some customization here. I know the API returns this severity level, which is 4, and they have different levels, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 being that it's no longer in force, with 1 being the worst, active flooding. So I can come into this column and actually say it's not just a number, but this represents a state. And this lets me map those values. So I can say 4 is success, so green in our case. Let's say 3 and 2 are a warning, and then 1 is kind of active flooding. So I can hit save. And what we now see is that 4 gets mapped to our green health state, and that comes alive on our block tile as well. Perhaps I just want to make sure there's one column here and hit save. And then we've started to build our first tile. Looking good. We'll call this flood warnings. Let's call the dashboard flood dashboard. Great. All right, let's add another tile. So we'll do the same flow. We'll use that HTTP request data stream again. But this time we'll pick out a particular endpoint. And this endpoint represents a flood monitoring station near me. So we can get data for that particular river and flood levels. So I'm going to come in here. I can do that preview again, and I know that again it's items, and I will want to expand those inner objects. So let's get that data back. So I can see there's tons of stuff in here, latest readings, other bits and pieces, all sorts of stuff. I can see we've got things like the min and the max, as well as the latest reading, like I say. So the gauge tile is a really good use here. So let's take our latest reading. Here we go. And the range for the gauge tile typically defaults from 0 to 100, but we can actually say this is dynamic and comes from the web API response. So here I can say we'll take the minimum on record and the max on record. Max on record. There we go. So I can see actually it's very much kind of healthy within that range at the moment. The other thing you can do with web API data is monitor it. Once you've got that data into SquaredUp, you can use all of our usual features. So we can turn on monitoring, make sure it's looking at the same value. And I can say, if it goes above 1.1, perhaps that's an issue. And if it goes above 0.9, that's a warning. So you can see those kind of measures there as well. So I can hit save and I start to visualize the current water level, let's say. Looking good, starting to get there. And we'll add one more tile, and this will be showing the water level over time. So a great use for the line chart here. So we'll add that tile, again, hit data, use the HTTP request, and paste in the API endpoint there, which is just the latest set of readings from this flood monitor. Again, I can do items here. For this API, actually, we don't need to expand the inner objects. There's nothing too nested. I can see actually we've just got date time and the value, which is what we need for the line chart. So I can hit apply and make sure we get that data back. There we go. And one thing I want to show you here actually is how to parameterize these requests. So by default, I think this is just showing maybe 30 days worth of data, but obviously SquaredUp does have this concept of time frame. So what we can do is come back in here, and I'm going to add another parameter. In this case, they have the API has a parameter called since, and I can reference using our mustache syntax and the current time frame that this tile or that SquaredUp is set to. So if I hit apply here, we'll get that will be applied to the API, and it will now be filtering based on whatever the time frame is. So if I switch to our line chart here, let's just make sure that's all good. Date, time, value. Don't need a series. There we go. So we can see that data coming back. So if I hit save, you can see this is actually, it's showing me 24 hours right now, but maybe if I want 7 days, I can just click and that updates automatically. So that date gets passed to that API via that query parameter, and just using our mustache syntax there to reference it. You can also reference timeframe.end if you want to specifically do from and to, but for us, just having the start here is enough. So that's looking pretty good. I've got my flood dashboard. I can share that out with whoever I want. Maybe just put it up at home, share it with my wife, and we can keep an eye on those flood levels and any flood warnings. One additional thing I wanted to just give you a little sneak peek on, if you like, is a couple of things we've been working on. So while the Web API, as you can see, is pretty powerful in its current form, there's lots more we want to do. And one of the missing pieces is the ability to create objects from an API response. And objects are really useful in SquaredUp because you can search for them, you can drill down to them, you can even use them as filters on your dashboards. So let me show you how that's going to work in the future. If I come to our data source here, I'll have a new option to configure an import. So I can say configure object import. And what we're going to import is a list of all the available monitoring stations, so not just the one that I previously hard-coded, but instead we'll get a list of all those stations. For this case, I'm just going to pull in 100, so I can hit apply. Make sure we're pulling out the items from that API request again, and I should start to see that data come through. So yeah, I can see a list of stations there. Great. So what we'll then do is map this to objects. So for an object, you need an ID column, you need a name column, a type, and you can also pick some other properties. So we will use the station reference as the ID. For the name, I think we've got a river name, and we can set this to a fixed string of station. This is just the type that you'll see throughout the UI when you drill down and when you scope to these objects. I could also pull in some other properties, so maybe I want the latitude and the longitude, for example. So that'd be lat. Let's type that there, long. Cool. So if I hit save on this, what SquaredUp will now do is on a schedule regularly make that request and import those objects here. So you can see as we've been speaking, that's just come through. So I've got 74 different rivers now. And there's a few cool things you can do with this. So what we're going to do is create another dashboard, and we'll call this river level, and we'll actually create a dashboard variable. So I can come in here and say add dashboard variable. We'll add a new collection, and I can see we've got that type. If I filter to EA API of station, which is what we set, and I'll just pick all stations for now, all the stations, and hit save. We won't default to a particular station, and we'll hit add. So now on this dashboard, I have a picker of river, so I can search for a random river somewhere and pick it. Now, at the moment, we're not doing anything with that. It's just the object's been imported, and I've got it as a filter. So what we're going to do is copy the tile we previously built for this current water level. And if I say copy to, and take that to our existing dashboard, the one we just created with that variable, and hit copy. That will get copied over. We'll delete that existing tile. I'll just use tidy layout to shuffle that up. So this is the tile we created previously, so it's still hard coded to that particular station. So what we want to do in here is delete that reference and use again the mustache style syntax to reference the variable. So here you can do variable 1, and I'll pick the first thing selected. It only lets you pick a single thing, so that's all good. And then source ID will be the ID, and in that case for us, that's that station reference, which is what we need to build the URL here. So I can hit apply and done, and now we see that new data coming back. And then from there I can pick other objects and see that data for whatever river I want. You know, I haven't had to build a static dashboard for every river. I've got one kind of template dashboard, if you like, and can pick and choose that variable. And like I mentioned earlier, one of the particularly cool things about importing objects into SquaredUp is it gives you ability to search for it. So if I search again for this river, I can drill down to that object, and with some luck I then see that river level dashboard that we created. So those dashboards with a variable kind of show up in two places. You can access the dashboard and pick and choose the variable value you're after, or you can search for something and you see that dashboard with the relevant data already kind of filtered in. So yeah, really cool way of just using some of our SquaredUp features like variables, like the WebAPI, and yeah, some enhancements that are coming soon. So hopefully that's a good demo of just the capabilities of the Web API. We've obviously covered some of the stuff in the columns tab, which I know can be pretty advanced, but yeah, hopefully really useful when you're working with completely custom data like this. And yeah, a little sneak peek of what's to come in the future. Let me just jump back to my slides. There we go. So yeah, that's it for the demos. Hopefully you're feeling like you know how to use the Web API data source a little bit better. Perhaps you've even got a few ideas in mind. Make sure you check out our docs. There's lots more examples and guidance there on how to configure the Web API, and definitely ask for help if you get stuck. We've got our community at community.squaredup.com. Otherwise, reach out to our support teams or drop me a message on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, that's it for now, and thanks so much for your time, and happy dashboarding.